I want to talk about sensor characteristics next. Sensor characteristics are basically a way of describing how a sensor works. Okay, what we want to find out is some properties of the measurements or some characteristics of the sensor that would enable us to predict how the sensor would operate in situations that we don't foresee, right? So they sensor characteristics, another way of saying sensor characteristics would be to say sensor behavior or sensor performance. So we want to measure those and know those so that we are able to use a sensor in situations that we have not used the sensor before, right? Now there are two kinds of characteristics that we will be looking at. One is called a static characteristic, and secondly, the dynamic characteristic. What do we mean by that? A static characteristic or a static behavior of sensor is when the input of the sensor is a constant, right? So we allow the sensor to respond to the input, which is constant, and then measure the output after the initial change has happened. So that's what would give us the static characteristic. On the other hand, the dynamic characteristic is what measures this transient behavior of the sensor. So if we change the input suddenly, how does the output change? Does it change in the same speed as the input? Does it have a certain delay associated it with before the output changes? Things of that kind. So that's what we're going to study in dynamic characteristics. So two kinds of behaviors, static and dynamic. And we want to know both so that we can use the sensor in different situations.